Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily for Thursday, January 31st, 2019. On today's episode, we're going to talk about the latest film and TV news. This is Slash Film Editor-in-Chief Peter Sciretta, and joining me on today's podcast is Slash Film Weekend Editor Brad Oman.
Hey, that's me.
And writer Chris Evangelista.
Hi.
Okay, so we were recording this earlier than usual, but we have a bunch of stories, some of which rolled over from yesterday. This is going to be almost an all-superhero edition, but before we get to superheroes, let's talk about technology and Stephen King, because I can connect those in some way. No, I can't. Okay, let's start off with technology. Let's start off with technology that I personally hate, and that is Ultraviolet. This is one of those digital storage lockers. Usually when you buy a movie, you can unlock it digitally, either on iTunes or it was Ultraviolet. Everybody got an email today. It's shutting down. Brad, what is going on?
Yes, Ultraviolet was one of the earliest digital movie lockers once studios started including a digital copy of movies along with the release of the movie on Blu-ray and DVD. And it used to be a service unto itself where you could only access certain movies from certain studios on Ultraviolet, and other digital copies were available through a different service. Since then, the service has changed to make the library more accessible. If you have an Ultraviolet account, you can link it to other digital retailers like Vudu and Fandango now, so you can access your movies from a variety of different places with much more ease. But because the market for digital movies has changed a lot since Ultraviolet first started, the owners have decided it's time to call it quits and shut down. The service will be ending on July 31st, but that doesn't mean people who have an Ultraviolet account will lose their movies. They just have to make sure that Ultraviolet is linked to one of the other retailers, which, like I said, includes Vudu, Fandango Now, and a couple other services. And you'll still be able to access most of your movies. They're not saying all, simply because there might be some exceptions. But Ultraviolet is anticipating very little disruption when it comes to customers not having access to certain titles in their Ultraviolet library. And honestly, at this point, even though it's kind of a big deal that Ultraviolet is shutting down, most people who have an Ultraviolet account have probably already linked their account to one of these other services so that they can access movies from other apps where they likely have a larger library. But the one of the bigger reasons that Ultraviolet is shutting down is because Disney launched Movies Anywhere in the fall of 2017. And since then, 20th Century Fox and Universal Pictures, who were the earliest adopters of distributing their digital movie copies through Ultraviolet, no longer do it exclusively through Ultraviolet and have teamed up with Movies Anywhere to make sure that their movies are available across all the various digital platforms that are also working with Movies Anywhere.
Yeah, and Brad, I know you're more of a physical guy. Both of you are more physical media guys. But, I'm a big digital movie guy, and even when I get a physical media and it comes with that digital copy, I want to unlock it, right away. And I'm assuming there's probably a lot of people out there listening that might have Blu-rays that have Ultraviolet code in them. So I guess this probably, this is time, guys. Unlock it now, or you will lose it forever.
If you have a digital copy that you haven't redeemed yet, or if you happen to buy a movie with an Ultraviolet digital copy, if it's an older Blu-ray or something like that, you have until July 31st to redeem it. And as long as you have your account linked to another digital retailer, you'll be able to have access to that in the other digital libraries.
Yeah, and I don't know. I think it's good because Ultraviolet was always the worst. I remember their original programming being so shoddy, and I don't know. It was just, I would just much rather have everything on iTunes. I know I'm an Apple guy. Chris, did you ever use Ultraviolet?
I'm sure I used it once or twice. I do prefer, whenever I have to use digital stuff, I do prefer Movies Anywhere just because it's so much easier.
Yeah.
So I've always hated how there were several different options, and I'm glad that they're paring them down because really there should just be one at this point.
Yeah, and it was just it was confusing to, I think, general, consumers in general. They're like, which one should I unlock it on? And because some would offer options, now movies anywhere, it's unlocked everywhere. It's just the best of all possible worlds. Okay, let's move on to Stephen King and talk about The Stand. There's a TV series heading to CBS All Access, which I guess, Chris, means that you're going to finally have to subscribe to this thing, right?
I guess, or I'll have to email them when it airs and say, give me a free screener. I'm not signing up for your service. Yeah, so The Stand is...
That's not fair. There's so many people out there listening right now. They're probably angry at that statement. They do not have the ability to do that, and they're going to have to subscribe, Chris.
Listen, I can't worry about them. I can only worry about myself in this dog-eat-dog world of film journalism. But... So the Stand is one of Stephen King's most famous novels. It's also one of his biggest novels. I think it's like 1 billion pages. It was previously turned into a mini series back in the 90s, and ever since then, people have been trying to make a new adaptation of it. For a while, Ben Affleck was trying to make a big screen adaptation of it, and he eventually walked away from it, saying he could never crack the script. At which point, Josh Boone, who directed The Fault in Our Stars, was hired to take over. And for a while, Josh Boone was trying to make multiple movies, basically a film series based on the book. And that, too, never got off the ground. Then he was talking to Showtime for a while to make it a Showtime series. And now it's finally ended up at CBS All Access. And Josh Boone is still involved. He's co-writing it, and he's going to direct it. Yeah, that's really the bulk of what we know. There's also a comment from Stephen King where he says he's read the scripts and he's really liked them, and that's great. But at the same time, I remember before the Dark Tower movie came out, Stephen King also said, "Oh, I really like the script for this," and we all know how that turned out. So I would take that at face value. But for now, this is what's happening. The Stand is coming to CBS All Access probably in 2020.
Yeah, like Stephen King always says the new version of whatever he's is like the best, right? Like that's...
Yeah, the only thing he doesn't like is Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, which everyone agrees is like the best adaptation of all of his books, but that's the one he doesn't like. So yeah, take whatever he says with a grain of salt. I love you, Stephen King, but you have really bad taste in movies.
Now, Chris, tell me this, because I've only watched that old miniseries that was produced for network television, and I was not a huge fan of that. I have not read the book. Why should I care about The Shining?
Oh, you mean The Stand?
The Stand, sorry.
I mean, it's a huge, the miniseries is okay, but it was also very much a TV movie. And I guess this is going to be too, but I can only hope they're going to up the budget. I can only hope they're going to make it more modern. It's a very epic story. It's sort of like I almost want to call it like Stephen King's Lord of the Rings, even though I guess The Dark Tower is that too. But it's very sprawling. There are hundreds of characters. It spans all these different states. It's about the end of the world, and it's about rebuilding the world after the world ends, and that can be a very compelling thing if it's done right. And I do think that original miniseries was not great. It was the best it could be at the time, so I think there's definitely room for improvement. And a thing like this, it has such a huge cast of characters that if they cast a lot of like cool, recognizable names, I think that's going to attract people too. But then again, I don't know.
That requires a budget, Chris.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I don't know what the budget of CBS All Access is. I feel like they blew all their money on buying Star Trek, and they have no other money to do anything else. So I guess we're going to have to see what happens.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to superhero stuff. Let's first talk about Zack Snyder, who, was making this whole DC EU, and he had plans for a trilogy of Justice League movies. This is all of stuff we kind of already knew. Kevin Smith on his podcast or videocast, whatever you want to call it, Fat Man Beyond, he mentioned that while he was on the set of Star Wars Episode 9 in the UK, he talked to a bunch of crew members there that were working on Justice League with Zack Snyder, and they saw the Jim Lee breakdown boards of all 3 Justice League movies, according to Smith, and they kind of give us an idea of what we would have gotten if we had gotten, the Justice League Snyder cut and 2 sequels. And what that is according to the original plan, and we kind of knew this. I think I broke this on a podcast one of our first podcasts. And at the end of the film, the Justice League was going to defeat Steppenwolf, and this would lead to an appearance from his boss, Darkseid. And so at the end of the film, Steppenwolf would be zapped back to his home planet via a boom tube, and through which the League would get their glimpse at Darkseid. Smith describes that the League saw Darkseid, and Darkseid saw them. Boom tube closes, and that is the end of the effing movie. With them all knowing that there's something out there, and we have to go. Smith also revealed that the shot from the trailer of Alfred expressing gratitude to a mysterious figure was not directed at Superman, as many originally thought, but it was actually going to be Green Lantern there. So Justice League 2, according to Smith, was going to go cosmic and take the fight to the Apocalypse, and the Lantern Corps would obviously be involved there, and I guess Snyder had planned to have a Infinity War Empire Strikes Back ending to that film, where the Darkseid would have defeated the League, conquered the Earth, and reduced it to the apocalyptic landscape that Batman saw in his nightmare sequence. And then the third film would be the big showdown, where the entire third movie is the hero's last stand against Darkseid and the forces of the apocalypse. Smith seemed super excited about that in this video. I'll link it in the show notes. I know I'm going to throw it to you guys, and you guys are going to hate on this. And I'm not saying I would have been excited for this, but one of the things that really irked me about the DCEU that we saw was it seemed like none of it was planned. It was just kind of thrown together. Why were, these why were there files of these metahumans on Lex Luthor's computer in Batman, or what was that, Batman vs. Superman? Yeah, it was Batman vs. Superman. And it just seemed like they didn't know where they were going. It at least sounds here like Snyder had a plan, and that would have been an interesting plan to actually have that. But I guess the second Justice League would have probably come out after Infinity War. So I think Infinity War would have beat DC to it at that point. Does this at all, Brad, does this excite you at all?
I wouldn't say that it excites me, but it just makes me curious. Despite the fact that I hate the time anytime someone says they want to see the Snyder cut of Justice League, and the constant barrage of people asking about it and demanding it, hearing details about it makes me very curious, simply what it would have been like. And, I think just seeing it would be fascinating. So again, I wouldn't necessarily be excited, but it would just be out of sheer morbid curiosity that I would, want to know more, maybe at least read a script or something like that to understand exactly what Zack Snyder's full vision was. Funnily enough, actually, for anybody who keeps up with the superhero bits out there, Zack Snyder made a T-shirt for a charity that supported suicide prevention, and some fans seemed to think and were breaking down that the design that he created looked like it was some kind of cryptic map for what he had planned to unfold in the entirety of his DC Extended Universe story arc. So if you go out and search for Zack Snyder Justice League shirt, you'll find probably the Reddit thread that has everyone breaking down the details of it, and I'm sure he's commented on Vero whether or not those things are accurate.
Yeah, that's he's the only person in the world that uses this weird social media service because his friend started it or something. Hopefully we can link that superhero bits in the show notes if you can find that for me, Brad. Chris, are you at all interested in even learning more about what the plans were for Justice League or the trilogy? Or is it
Look, if someone wrote a really detailed breakdown, a book, if there was a book that came out a few years from now about what went wrong and here's what could have happened. Like a really dishy, dirty, scoopy behind the scenes look at everything that went on behind the scenes of this movie. I would absolutely read that, but as like a movie, I could care less. Like that description you were talking about sounds exhausting, and I don't even know what the hell a boom tube. What is that? Like I don't. What is that?
That was in Justice League. Remember those like it was kind of like these wormholes that connected different dimensions.
Is that what they're called? Boom tubes? I don't remember that.
Yeah.
I just remember saying, I wish this would end so I could leave the theater. So like I said, I would love like a really well-written insider book, like behind the scenes of what the hell went wrong with Justice League. Because I think that would be fascinating, but I have no desire to actually see it.
I just wonder if we'll ever get like a behind the scenes look at that. It seems like so many people don't want to talk about it. Interestingly enough, Zack Snyder, who has another film coming out, it was announced yesterday, was interviewed by The Hollywood Reporter. They didn't even ask him about the existence or non-existence of a Snyder Cut, which I think would have, broken a corner of our internets. I have heard it actually exists, and I'm not one of those people that is pushing the idea that it might ever get released, because I don't think Warner Brothers has any benefit from releasing that cut if it exists. But I've heard it exists. You know what I would like to see is, I think Kevin Smith actually did this with his Superman script. Maybe Brad, but it was released as a comic book in a graphic novel form, so that people could experience this movie that never happened. I remember
hearing about that, but I haven't read it or anything. But that would be something that I would probably go out of my way to read.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see if it would have been any good, but
or maybe they can just release it page by page on Vero.
I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if that eventually becomes the case, because Zack Snyder needs to get people on Vero somehow. Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about other things that WB has planned. Originally Ben Affleck was going to be directing The Batman, which was going to be a follow up on Justice League, and it was going to be starring him as Batman. But Matt Reeves took over the directing reins, and now we know that his movie is coming in 2021, and we talked about it a little bit yesterday. But now with this release date, we now think we have completely officially confirmed that Ben Affleck is not going to be Batman. Is that correct?
Indeed. Yesterday, Warner Brothers announced a new slate of release dates, including 3 of their upcoming superhero movies. And one of them was Matt Reeves' The Batman, and it has been slated for release on June 25th, 2021. And with that news came confirmation that Ben Affleck will not be back. The actor even tweeted out that he was excited for The Batman in summer 2021 and to see Matt Reeves' vision come to life, pretty much confirming that he is not involved in any capacity. And the word on the street right now is
but does that confirm it? Like, it seems to me like he's tweeting a link to a story that says he's not in it, but he never officially confirms that fact.
I mean, you're right. He doesn't say like I'm not Batman anymore, but like it's pretty clear. And like This is something that has been talked about for a while now, and everyone has pretty much known behind the scenes of all the dealings with DC and Warner Brothers. So it's not surprising. And the word on the street is that apparently Matt Reeves' the Batman will focus on a younger Bruce Wayne instead. So Ben Affleck's not exactly prepared to play a younger Bruce Wayne. So it seems like we're completely done.
I do want to say about Ben Affleck. I think we even said a year and a half ago on this podcast that I knew for sure that he wasn't playing Batman. Like this is something this isn't a recent development. It's not Matt Reeves' fault that he's not playing Batman. It's clearly that Ben Affleck did not want to play Batman, despite appearing at Comic-Con and kind of suggesting otherwise without straight up saying so. It was kind of a weird denial at Comic-Con.
It sounds like we've moved on to talking about whether or not Henry Cavill is still Superman.
Yeah, I mean, is he still Superman?
I mean, Ben Affleck's not Batman, so who knows?
But they have Wonder Woman, so they need to keep Wonder Woman and I guess Aquaman now. I mean,
Don't forget Cyborg. They'll keep him too.
no, we're never going to hear of Cyborg ever again.
Cyborg was the most popular character from Justice League. I read a whole dissertation about it.
Yeah, whenever I go out, I always see kids wearing with like Cyborg backpacks and then Cyborg shirts.
I keep hearing his signature phrase, "Robot Smash."
Hey, I liked Ezra Miller as the Flash, and I mean, you gotta admit, like, you'd much rather see more Ezra Miller Flash movies than him in Fantastic Beasts, right?
Oh, 100%.
But okay, no, but go back to the Ben Affleck as Batman for a second. I do want to say that I actually really liked Ben Affleck as Batman. I feel like the performances in both of those movies, which I know get a lot of crap, like the movies as a whole, but I think Ben Affleck and Henry and Gal, you know, the whole group actually turned out pretty good performances as those characters in not so great movies. And I was really interested. I'm a fan of Affleck as a director. I would have been really interested to see him direct a Batman movie, but you know what? I'm more interested in Matt Reeves directing a superhero movie. So, I mean, what are your guys? Since this is like the last we'll ever talk about this. Chris, what do you have to say about the loss of Ben Affleck as Batman?
You know, I'm right there with you. I actually think Ben Affleck did the best he could with the character. I'm not a fan of Batman v Superman or Justice League, but I do think, especially in Batman v Superman, I really liked the idea of this bitter, xenophobic Batman. Like, Batman was pretty much like the villain in that movie, and I kind of liked that idea, and I liked how Ben Affleck played him as this just total asshole. But at the same time, the script was really bad, and the script for Justice League was even worse. So I think Ben Affleck did the best he could with really shitty material, and I hope he just moves on to better things now, because I do think with the right material, Ben Affleck can do really good work. I'm not going to say I think he's like a great actor. I don't think he has a lot of range, but in the right hands, he can turn in like memorable performances. So, and I know he's had some like personal problems, so I hope he's okay. I hope he just goes on, does better things, and moves past this weird chapter in his life where he was briefly Batman.
Brad, what say you?
I actually agree with you guys too. I thought that Ben Affleck as Batman and Bruce Wayne was one of the better parts of Batman v Superman and Justice League. I like the grizzled older Batman. It's not quite as good as other interpretations of an older Batman that we've seen in comics and in animated form. But I thought his performance was solid, and it is kind of a bummer that we won't get to see what he could have done with a solo movie that doesn't have Zack Snyder involved. But like you said, Matt Reeves is an incredible filmmaker, and I'm extremely excited to see what he brings to the table, especially since he's talked about this being more of a noir Batman.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to some other release date news that Warner Brothers announced yesterday. What else did they announce in their slate?
Yeah, so we have word that the Suicide Squad sequel will be arriving on August 6th, 2021, so just a few months after the Batman hits theaters, and it has been given the title of The Suicide Squad. And
isn't that a little confusing that the first movie is called Suicide Squad and then the second movie is called The Suicide Squad?
It is a little confusing. I think that the reasoning behind it is that there have been rumblings that this new sequel is supposed to be kind of like a soft reboot where they're kind of trying to distance themselves from what happened in the first movie, since it wasn't quite as well received as Warner Brothers might have hoped. And funnily enough, along with that, we know if Chris wants to jump in here, that James Gunn has been confirmed to direct. So that shows us why Warner Brothers was so keen to get a release date out there.
Yeah, Chris, what do we know?
Yeah, so not only is James Gunn directing it, but there's also word that it's going to focus on completely new characters. So don't expect to see Captain Boomerang back anytime soon. I know everyone loved him. And Slipknot, the man who could climb anything. I guess his head exploded, so he wouldn't come back anyway. But James Gunn is directing, and it's kind of weird because, Suicide Squad, when the first one came out, it was thought of as, Warner Brothers' answer to Guardians of the Galaxy. It was like, all right, well, Marvel made their quirky team-up movie. Here's ours. And now, a few years later, the guy who directed Guardians of the Galaxy is directing the Suicide Squad sequel. So it's very, I don't want to say ironic. It's just a very strange turn of events. And we had heard a rumor about this, I think, last year that Gunn was in talks to direct. And now it looks like it's official because, as we all know, Marvel fired him for some naughty tweets, and now Marvel's loss is Warner Brothers' gain.
Yeah. I had talked to a friend who had talked to a friend who had read this James Gunn draft of Suicide Squad. And from what I heard, number one, that Deadshot and Harley Quinn are back in this movie. I also heard that the script is very much feels like Guardians of the Galaxy. So I think, Brad, you might actually be excited for a DC movie for once.
Yes, but it's also very bittersweet because I would much rather have James Gunn directing Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. So it's, it'll be like having a McDonald's cheeseburger as opposed to a cheeseburger from Five Guys.
There were some other release dates that were announced as well, right, Brad?
Yeah, there was one more comic book title that Warner Brothers announced, and it's not anything that anyone's going to be thrilled about, but they're making a DC Super Pets movie. We heard about that.
How dare you? Chris is so excited for this movie.
I'll see this. Why not?
I heard about this last year. It was in development back in August, and it came at a time when it seemed like Warner Brothers was just willing to do anything with DC properties other than continue their original plan that sparked from Batman vs. Superman. But it's Legion of Super Pets is the comic that originally starred this whole team of super-powered pets that were tied to other superheroes. Like Crypto is Superman's dog, but there's also Prody, who is a shapeless mass of protoplasm capable of taking on any shape or form. There's Streaky the Super Cat, Comet the Super Horse. This all sounds like a complex joke to me, but it is animated fare. It's something that's going to be meant for kids, much like Teen Titans Go to the Movies which was a moderate success last year. So it just looks like Warner Brothers wants to tap into something that Marvel hasn't really by making a comic book fare that is more geared towards kids.
What is the odds that Henry Cavill will reprise his role as Superman in voice form in this movie to introduce his dog?
I mean, that's actually a fair question. It would be interesting if they did that, especially since Warner Brothers did have Gal Gadot, Jason Momoa, and Margot Robbie voice Wonder Woman, Aquaman, and Harley Quinn in the Lego Movie too. So clearly they're trying to keep those characters established to the actors playing them, even in animated form. So it's not out of the realm of possibility. But of course, that assumes that Henry Cavill is still playing Superman. So who knows?
There was a couple other release date things, but they're probably not as interesting to talk about here, right?
Well, one of them is fairly interesting because since we talked about Stephen King earlier, the Shining sequel, Dr. Sleep, has been moved up from its original January 2020 release date and is instead coming out fall this year on November 8th. So it sounds like Warner Brothers has a lot more confidence in this movie than they might have initially, because January, it's not quite as bad of a dumping ground for theatrical releases as it used to be, but it's not necessarily a big blockbuster month. But releasing it in the fall.
What are you talking about, Brad? We got Serenity in January. It's fine. All the movies are fine.
It sounds like they might even think that it has awards potential because award season usually starts at the beginning of November. And putting it in that month does show that Warner Brothers feels like they have something that audiences are really going to be interested in seeing. So that seems like good news.
Chris, I know you're the big Stephen King fan here. Does this make you more excited about this sequel?
It does. I'm cautiously optimistic about this, both because of the release date move and because I know some things about it that have me pretty excited. So fingers crossed. I'm not a fan of the Dr. Sleep book, but I am a fan of Mike Flanagan, who's directing it. So I have faith he's going to turn it into something good.
Very cool. Okay, that brings us to the end of today's Slash Film Daily. Chris, where can people find more of your work online?
I'm at slashfilm.com, and I'm on Twitter at CEvangelista413.
Brad, if I'm looking for you, where can I find you?
I just got fired from Ultraviolet, so I will keep working at slashfilm.com. And you can also find me on Twitter at Ethan_Anderton. And I've got my own podcast called Go Flix Yourself. You can check out on iTunes and other podcasting platforms.
You can find all the stories we mentioned in today's podcast on slashfilm.com and linked in the show notes. This podcast, Slash Film Daily, is published every weekday on iTunes, Google Play, Overcast, Spotify, all the popular podcast apps. Please feel free to send your feedback, questions, comments, concerns, or life advice from Chris to peter@slashfilm.com. That's peter@slashfilm.com. And please head on over to our iTunes page. Write us a couple sentences, give us a 5 stars, tell your friends, spread the word, and we'll see you tomorrow. Okay, so what are the chances that the Super Pets movie, is as good as, Into the Spider-Verse? And, we get spin-off movies with each of the, we get the crypto movie. We get the piece of slime guy thing that you mentioned movie.
I'd say there's 100% chance of that happening.
I don't know if they'll all get their own spin-offs, but I definitely feel like they're going to try and replicate that success. But, I mean, who wouldn't want to see a movie about Streaky, the super cat?
Yes, or the horse. I'd see the Super Horse movie. I wish this were live action. That would be more exciting.
I just want to see a movie called Super Horse.
Yes.